I'd love to introduce Bob Marsh. So come on up. Grab a mic. Working.
Here we go.
So remember, Chai sales.
Turn away from that bright light.
And I'm going to turn it off. But if you want to tweet what's going on, it's at Bob Marsh 5, and it's at LevelEleven. Right. You bring that seat over. I'm going to turn this thing off.
See if I can do it. Nope.
Good. A lot better without a big, massive glare happening. How you doing?
I'm great. I'm great. Good to be here. I love looking at the water. I haven't had a chance to look at the water. So it was a nice surprise.
Awesome. So, I really thank you for coming here to kick things off for the Chicago Enterprise Sales Meetup. And so, just so everyone here knows about you and what's going on, maybe just share what you're doing today, how you got there, your journey in sales, and also share one interesting, unique thing that people might not know about you.
Yeah, sure. So, see all about myself. So I'm from Detroit, so our company's headquartered in Detroit. I get to Chicago very regularly, and have been for a number of years. So I'm from, I was born in Detroit. I actually grew up in outside of Buffalo, New York. Spent some years there. Went to college down at Cleveland and John Carroll. Spent a little time out west in San Francisco and kind of back in Detroit. So a little bit all over, but the majority of my life has been in Detroit. So I spent my career largely in sales and sales management. I've been doing that for over 20 years. I really first started in retail sales. Like when I was in college, I was looking for something to do over the summer, and just started selling golf equipment, like when I would be on break from college. I didn't realize that, I was actually pretty good at it. My manager said, you're pretty good at this. So that was kind of how I, realized, like, hey, that might be what I do for a career. My dad was always in sales and sales leadership, so I kind of was curious about it. But then my first job was at Xerox out of college. Was kind of okay at that, but it was a great training ground that's known as a very strong sales training group. And then I did my first startup selling, doing more sales marketing, interactive marketing programs, so online advertising, SEO work, email marketing, etc. And I would go out and sell something, and I have to go back and actually do it. So I'd go build the website, I'd do the online ad campaign, and then go sell another one. So it wasn't very efficient, but that's kind of got me into it. And then I went to a startup out in Silicon Valley, did that for a little while, and then ultimately joined a company called ePrize, which is headquartered in Detroit, had a nice presence here in Chicago. And there I kind of had the experience of really growing a company from a dozen people to about 500 people. Ultimately selling it a few years ago before I started LevelEleven. So really all the time in my career as a seller and a sales manager, and things that I learned that I thought was necessary to run an effective sales organization and that I didn't see happening in the market, really came down to creating what LevelEleven is today. So we'll talk a little about that. But as far as interesting thing about myself, I would say, maybe the fact that I'm up here talking about this, and I sucked at sales when I first got into it. Kind of interesting. In particular, the retail thing was fine. It's a totally different deal than enterprise selling.
Right.
And so when I first started at ePrize, it was selling into large enterprises, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and didn't have a very good manager. But somehow the CEO saw something in me, so let me kind of stick it out a little while, and eventually figured it out. But I was pretty awful.
Yeah, I wasn't all that great myself. I was a programmer, so I jumped into that, and everyone in my office ended up quitting. And the VP sales said, "Oh, Mark, just carry it back for a while, and just talk to Bank of America and Boeing, and all those small companies." So I definitely feel the sometimes a level of discomfort.
There's right, and everyone's going to have some discomfort with it. It's actually become, it's hard for me. I've realized I have a coach that I work with, and I always have a hard time whenever you have to make a hard decision on removing someone when they're not working, and whether it's here or kind of prior to that. And I realize part of the reason I have such struggle with it is that even when it's really clear it's the right move, because like I was so bad at it and like sold bad deals, wasn't effective, and like someone like saw something and just let me continue. And I always worry like, gosh, can I just give that person another chance? And sometimes if you hang on too long, it doesn't work. But yeah, I think everybody struggles, and some people either have a desire to get better and some don't. But
Yeah, I think that's actually a really key point. Let's actually dig into that like a little bit downstream, because I think motivation, desire, and how you manage your team is so important. But it might be really helpful just to define what we're even talking about when we talk about leadership. That's what we want to talk about today, and what it means to be a modern sales leader. And as I was kind of preparing for this talk, I remember that quote by Peter Drucker, which defined management and leadership. And management was doing things right, whereas leadership is doing the right thing. So how do you view leadership, and what does it mean to you?
yeah, it's an oft confused sort of thing. Like there's a lot of kind of opinions on it. I look at it that a manager is like managing, like getting a process done. They're helping people get something done, and they're very much in the middle of it with their team members day to day. Like they're helping jump in on deals with them. If it's in sales, like they're helping jump in on deals with them. They're really coaching on like the real tactical parts of selling. Where a leader is more like setting the tone and setting the direction and setting like, hey, this is the type of organization that I want, but then they leave it to the manager to actually create that organization. I think for myself, I've had managers and I've had leaders, and so I found that the managers were just really effective at helping me just manage through a process, where the leaders, were people like there was like I mentioned my time at ePrize. Remember there was in the beginning it was a manager, and like it was very much like just trying to train on like these little like sales techniques. And he would jump in on a deal and try to close it for me. It's like it's not really that helpful. And then ultimately got someone who I would really consider more of a leader. And I was like still struggling on closing it. There was a piece of business I was trying to win with a company called Fujitsu, and it was like, okay, finally I'm really close to getting a deal done, like I was so many times before, and I didn't. And he kind of just like coached me on how to handle it. Like he never swooped in. He never like got his hands on the deal. Like he did, and I remember like there was a moment where I was like, "Hey, this is the situation, and they're asking me for another discount." He's like, "No, no, I'm not doing it. Just tell them no." And I was like, "What? Like you can't do that. Like what's the deal? Like I'm finally about to sell something." And so, but like he really kind of just pushed me to a little bit more uncomfortable. And I remember I went and did it, and it worked. And like the guy's like, "Okay, I just want to see how far I could go." I'm like, see, like I was, this is so. But as a little example of like he continued to like lead and lead and lead, and it kind of helped the whole organization operate a lot more effectively.
Well, I think it's really fascinating. Compare and contrast, right? Because I think there's this concept of what we know as sales leadership and the typical practices, and then I think there's a different way. And I think we're starting to see that filter in a little bit more, and that there's these different tactics. And we're going to talk about modern sales leadership, but maybe give us some examples. Like what do you view as kind of the old school sales leadership and management?
Yeah, there's still a lot of it out there. I mean, I think of it as so first of all, the whole like world of sales is changing, and really it starts with the buyer.
Right.
Like the buyer is what's changing, and it has this like downstream effect on the seller and then the manager. So what's happening is you think about like in the old world, the buyer, like they were beholden to the salesperson. Everything they learned came from the salesperson. The salesperson had the brochures, and the salesperson had the pricing, and the salesperson knew the case studies they wanted to talk about, right? Where in the modern world, the buyer's in control. They are the ones, they know more, at least as much as the seller knows in many cases. They're doing their research online. They're reading the reviews online. They're like understanding what other people do. They don't need a procurement department because they understand how the sell stuff works because things are transparent. So the buyer is changing, and so that means that the sellers need to be changing also. So if you're a seller, like no longer can you just control that process and just take the prospect wherever you want to go. Like the old salesperson, like that's the way they function. They were just like, I got to get a bunch of meetings and just close some deals, and that's all I got to do. Where now, like they realize that I need to be educated. Like I always kind of thought that when I was in selling retail or even in kind of the enterprise space, that my job isn't to sell, my job is to help people buy. So my role is like, I don't have like some magic closing technique or some like manipulation to make someone do something they don't want to do. Like that doesn't work. Like, so as a seller, like today more than ever is that you need to be an educator. You need to understand what that buyer is going through. You need to understand what they are looking for so that you can help them make an informed decision. And of course, like if you're the expert, who are they going to come to? They're going to come to you, and it's worth a premium in the whole thing. So that changed the seller. But then the next part of it, like back to the manager, is then how that continues to go downstream. Then the manager, the old school manager is, we talk about is all about closing meetings, steak dinners,
Smile and
dial, Rolodex, frequent flyer miles. Like that's what it was. Like I'm like the road warrior, and like that's what like a sales VP would come in, and that's what it was all about. Like I got relationships, I can get deals done. Like I'll hire my guys. Like that was just kind of the approach, and so. That's changed also, again, because the buyer and the seller are changing. You got the younger people coming, how do you manage that? So the more modern kind of manager, leader, they're more like inputs drive outputs approach. Like how do I look at a process and how do I know, we've got technology and CRM all enabling all this stuff. So they're thinking about this process mentality. They're coaches, like it doesn't mean they're soft. Like, they kind of coach and inspire people against like a common way of methodology that they design. They don't like dictate, they kind of enable a collaborative environment where people are learning from each other and they're all like getting better as a system. And so that's kind of there's a difference in all of it. Buyer, the seller, the manager now is all kind of the old and the new, but it all starts with the buyer.
Yeah. So is that what you meant when you said the modern sales leader is almost like a Navy SEAL? I thought that was kind of an interesting thing that you wrote in one of your posts a while back ago. You can literally maybe elaborate on that?
Yeah, it'd be cool if I could say, yeah, because I used to be a Navy SEAL.
I was.
Really? Okay. No, just, the idea is that the modern kind of approach to managing a sales organization, like I think of a Navy SEAL as like they're very, very process oriented. There's a system, there's a plan, there's a plan that people need to execute. But then when you think about it, it's not robot oriented. It's like you still need highly skilled people, well-trained people that can be out there and make the right decisions like in the moment. But if you zoom out, there's a plan, there's a process, there's a set of operating metrics that you function, there's a core set of values that you operate around. Like it's a very organized thing. It's not like shoot from the hip kind of thing. So I think of it as just if people try to equate military things to kind of real world, that's kind of a common kind of trait that I see. It's really similar in sports, right? Like you find more and more companies or sports teams are using data. Like the best coaches out there, they think about the fundamentals. They don't just say go win, and I'll talk to you at the end of the game. Like, rah. Like. So anything like John Wooden. John Wooden, one of the greatest kind of coaches of all time. Like the first thing he would teach is these kids when they come in out of high school. These are the best like basketball players in the country, and the first thing he teaches them to do is how to tie their shoes. And it was because he knew that like if you don't have your sock on right, and there's a little wrinkle, you can get a blister. If you get a blister, then like you might not be able to play in a game. You could miss a shot. If you don't tie your shoe properly, it can be loose, and then you could twist it, and you could, So like it was that level of detail. It's about the behaviors and the activity and the things that you do that will lead to the outcome that you're going for. That's what you need to manage. There's a guy that I know really well. He's a former kicker for the University of Michigan. He runs a Salesforce consulting company in Detroit, and he's like, Lloyd Carr was his coach while he was there, and he's like, we would finish a game, and the special teams would all get together. And as a kicker, like I knew like when the clock would start to when we had the snap time like from when the snap got to the the holder's hands, and then like how long it took me to kick it, and then there was just the detail around all of the steps is what we paid attention on. It wasn't like, damn it, you missed that field goal. Like it was everything around it, because that's what you can control and that's what you can change.
No, it's really amazing. I mean, it actually plays into a lot of what we talked about in our Boston group on Monday. This whole idea of just focusing on the fundamentals, because if you get your fundamentals right, all the other things start to play out, and you start to build your sales confidence. Your mindset's changing. So you have to go back to your fundamentals and see what's messed up in your game. So, all that being said, what do you think about, like, what does a modern sales leader have to do? What do they focus on? Right? You talked about process. I think there's a lot of talk about metrics and KPIs. So what is the modern sales leader specifically focused on?
So I mean, without question, it's still, despite everything we talked about, it's closing more revenue. Like that's kind of, so there's no question. Like yeah. So
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
We'll hang out.
So
It's
yeah.
cool.
So there's just a different approach to it. That's
Right.
kind of happening. So what I see out there is like one is more and more you hear about how do you build a great culture. So the focus on how do I build, and it's going to be different for every stage of company, but how do I build a great culture, which means I bring on the people that want to learn from each other, they want to collaborate with each other, they want to get better, et cetera. They truly understand their market. Like they're not just like, hey, I was good in sales in this career, come over here. You got to really understand the market, understand the buyer. Like so, they really believe that. If I think about on the marketing front, as we kind of looked at how do we build leads for our own business, like
Right.
it's you got to be the thought leader. You got to be someone. You got to be the company. If your prospective customers are going to go out and they're going to research stuff to figure out like what they want to buy or what they need, like whose stuff do you want them reading? Your stuff or someone else's stuff? So how do you be that thought leader? So I think that the sales leader, truly the modern, like really embraces that idea and tries to make sure their sellers are thinking that way also. Like how can you educate, and how can we learn from each other? And the other part of it is that they have this like operational approach. Like they kind of go in and say, yes, I understand, here's our sales goals that we need to achieve. How do I break that down? So, to be overly simplistic about it, it's like I need this kind of sales number, I need to close whatever, $10 million in business, which means we need X amount in pipeline. In order to get that pipeline with this many meetings, that many meetings we're going to talk to these types of buyers, I have this many calls. Like you just kind of map the process out, and then what happens is you build this like common kind of set of operating metrics to manage your sales organization, and then they manage to that like ruthlessly. And they can seek that down to the whole organization. Like I think historically this has not been an uncommon approach to selling for a while. But the problem is that data is sitting in a spreadsheet somewhere that no one sees except for the management team. And so what's changing is that data is then coming down at the individual seller level so that they know exactly, they can make the right decision throughout the day and where do I spend my time. The point is like you have a common way to be operating your organization, help everybody get better in the same way. It's not just, hey, who can close the most business? It's how are we following this process the right way? Which comes back to the culture and comes back to the education, because if you find, hey, there's a gap, like this individual team member has a gap between the number of conversations they're having and the number of proposals they're generating, okay, that's where the training gap is happening. Now I know what I need to go attack and I need to fix. So that kind of mentality and setup is really kind of what that modern leader is all about.
So maybe talk to us about what maybe some of those things that the leader should be looking at from a metrics and KPI standpoint, because there's so many things you can track, right? I think part of the challenge that I see with a lot of the sales leaders I've talked to is that there's so many things that they're trying to track that they spend all their time in, whether it's Salesforce or their CRM system, and they're not actually doing all the other things. Mm-hmm. So what's really important to track?
So, I mean, it's going to be different for every organization, of course. And yeah, with all this technology, the advantage is you can measure anything, but the problem is you can measure anything. And so you try to measure everything, and then you don't know what to do, and you're stuck. So, so you really got to kind of crystallize that down. So, but generally, I'd say, in addition to the obvious stuff, but like how much you're closing by segment, by team, et cetera. But there's things that a sales leader would look at, which is things like deal size, close rate, pipeline development, are we talking to the right customer? But then there's a different set of metrics that you need to use for your salespeople because it affects their decision making throughout the day. So I can't really prescribe like what every organization should do, but the common things that we often see, if you're and it's be different by roles. If you're a sales development rep who's maybe looking for sales opportunities and setting them up for a sales team, the common things we'll see is how many calls are they making, how many conversations are they having, how many qualified opportunities are they setting up, and how many actually convert. If you're a account executive, it's maybe, if you're inside sales, maybe talk time, and am I talking to the right size potential buyer, how many opportunities to get into a proposal stage, you know, how much pipeline do I have relative to quota. If I'm a field sales rep, you tweak those, and there's like face-to-face meetings, executive level briefings. So it's going to be different to every type of selling role, and also different within every company. I was talking to a customer recently that we're seeing this happen more often, where instead of just saying, hey, we're at a proposal stage, more and more we're seeing things like there's an ROI conversation. So,
Right.
you know, they're saying like, I've got an ROI conversation that's happening, or I'm having a high value conversation, which is reported as, you know, you're on the phone for more than X number of minutes. Or I was talking to the, where's the clear slide later? Like, we're talking earlier, like someone is, you know, now these companies are using the sales technology, and they'll say, hey, like one of the things we want our sales reps doing is they want them on the phone with a customer, talking about something, giving our sales presentation or demo, whatever it might be, and like that's, say, as an example, it's in clear slides. So like that pops into Salesforce, say, hey, I want to know, you know, we want our reps to be having these live conversations, presenting this information, this data, and it can't just be like, and go. You know, it's got to be, well, how often? Like, how often you do this? So these are the kind of things that are now starting to pop up as certain organizations use different pieces of technology.
It sounds like you're driving towards this idea of like high value activity.
Yes.
And you know, the other side of that I see is that a lot of organizations have kind of gone away from that very, I'd say, monolithic sales process, where it's like this pipeline, this different stages, and now they're actually getting very prescriptive and looking at, well, what information have we gleaned from the relationship, from the customer that we're trying to work with?
Right.
And actually describing their phases of the buying cycle, or matching their sales cycle, the buying cycle, with the information that they're able to gather to confirm along the way the right track. Are they tracking towards an actual deal? I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so it's got to be, it's fine that the words are changing from a sales process to a buying process. It kind of goes back to the whole change I talked about earlier. And so, you know, when people think of a process-driven sales or a step-driven or activity-driven sales process, they just instantly go to, you know, that's a high volume, hit the phones, like just activity, just not. Like the modern organizations, if it's a field organization or any sense, like there's a process, but the difference, like you're saying, is that process becomes some outcomes that happen. So it's not just how many times are you pressing buttons on a phone, it's like how many times are you having a high value conversation? How often are you talking to the VP level person? So one of the things that we'll do, you know, with our customers, we do it ourselves, is that to define what is that right buying process is, we'll run what we call just a win-loss analysis. Grab our team, pull the team together, and say, hey, let's talk about recent deals. It's not complicated, just pull the team together. Hey, talk about 2 deals you've recently won. Walk me through step by step exactly like what happened. You know, what was the buyer doing? Not just like, what did you do? What did the buyer do? Like when that call, like, don't tell me about the, like, let's talk about the call, but what was the outcome of the call? Like, what did the customer do after you finished that meeting? What did the customer go do? And then you look at that each step and you're figuring out what's the buyer doing. And then the other side of it is, which I find even is oftentimes more valuable, is let's look at things that we lost. And again, go through what happened, what was that conversation, what came out of it, what was the next step. But then also answer 2 questions. If you could have looked back and gotten out of that deal sooner, like when should you have just called it quits? Like when would that have been? And why is that? And so that helps you identify really quick, qualify it out, or know when you should leave, and like tell them like goodbye, which usually turns them around. And then the other one is, what could you have done somewhere in that process? You know, like when you were probably afraid to change anything when you're in the middle of it, you don't want to piss anybody off. But if you could have changed one thing that you did that may have turned that thing towards a win, what would it have been? And so in that, like for, you know, a lot of times for us, we would find, geez, we're noticing a trend. Like when we win, we're always talking to the sales leader. When we lose, we're never talking to the sales leader. And so it just like, it helps that, so I talk about the collaborative, when I talk about the model is very collaborative, is you run a session where everybody realizes that has that aha moment together, and then all of a sudden they get it. And now all of a sudden these operating metrics are things like, I'm not being big brother, like where, I'm being monitored.
Right,
It's like,
right.
I get it, I embrace it, and thank you for giving me a way to understand where I stand and not forgetting that if I don't do that consistently, I'm not going to win more business.
Yeah, I think that's so critical. You just mentioned the fact about collaboration, because there's always this conversation about competition versus collaboration on sales teams. So have you found a way of kind of balancing? Because you don't want to maybe a non-competitive sales team. I mean, sales and competition go hand in hand.
Yep.
But how are you able to kind of merge those two and make a more kind of positive, results-driven culture?
Yeah. So that, I mean, first of all, you'll find oftentimes that any good salesperson like has a real competitive spirit to them.
Right.
They just do, and a lot of people do. But like you tend to index a little higher in a sales organization or in salespeople. And so, competition is like a healthy thing. Like competitors, like not only to your company, but also within the organization. But it's got to be this healthy competition, which is what drives collaboration. So we end up talking about this a lot because there's elements of what we do where, a small part of it is like you end up stack ranking and like showing kind of comparisons. But what happens is like, sometimes someone will say, well, I'm worried about like, people, that'll be negative and they'll think like, hey, I'm bad, I'm at the bottom. And what we find is that is usually a signal of a culture problem. Like, if someone is at the bottom of a stack ranking and they feel shamed and they feel like that they're pushed to the side, like that's probably because your management team is terrible, makes everybody feel bad, that losing is a bad thing. Like, it usually is a cultural problem that exists, where in a positive environment, people say, no, that's helpful to me. Now, I didn't realize that before. And thanks to the visibility, now I realize like I need to go figure this out. So David and I were in the back there. We had a number of meetings today, and like one of the things that came up was, people would say, what happened, we often find is that the salesperson, in the old world, the manager would say, John, you're not doing very good at sales. Like, you need to, whatever, make more calls. You need to have more VP level conversations. Go talk to David. He's great at that. Now, John is like, yeah, I know, like he's your little pet like sales guy, and like, he's different than me, and it's different. And, like, this is negative scenario versus like all of a sudden when you make this stuff visible to people, and it's an environment where you support people for wanting to get better, and you're supportive of delivering data. All of a sudden, John goes and seeks out David by himself because he says, "Gosh, I didn't realize that he was so good at this. Can I take you out for a coffee and tell me what you're doing? Like, how are you getting all those meetings? Because I'm clearly missing on something." And so without that visibility and kind of understanding why these metrics are important, like you really empower those kinds of conversations to happen. And that's collaboration.
And really, I think it's so critical. And I do want to open up questions. So if people have questions, please, raise your hands. You definitely want to make this interactive and have everyone involved in the conversation. But I want to ask you kind of maybe a two-part question. And one is, how you get in that type of environment? Maybe like the guts of how you actually build that into your culture and the way you do things. And then the second part of it is, just maybe some thoughts around motivation, because I think that's also part and parcel to getting people excited, right? I mean, we always imagine salespeople should be self-motivated, and we always imagine it's money. But I think there's some other things that we've seen in research that says otherwise.
Yeah, so it's not money. I mean, it is the single motivation. It of course is a big motivator, because if you're in sales, like, you've signed up for a career of total accountability. Because you're willing to put your income and how you provide for yourself and your family on the line based on your own performance. So like, you are bought in to being held accountable and being successful. So I think that the key is, like, any salesperson, they want to win. They want to be successful. But it's not like the money is absolutely a part of it, but it's just, I want to know that I'm doing what's right and I'm doing like what's effective, and I just want the guidance on like where should I be spending my time. So it's, anybody wants to, sure, they want to be successful to make money, but also they want to feel like, hey, I'm helping other people be successful. I understand that if this is what's expected of me, that I'm like achieving, consistently on all these different elements. So money is absolutely like an element to it, but there's more to it than that. And any good salesperson is motivated by just being successful. And one of the outcomes of that can be money, but it's not. It's by far, it's absolutely not the only thing.
So, as an example, I mean, at LevelEleven, how are you, kind of providing or incenting, motivating the sales staff to focus on the right things, right? And to keep everyone up, obviously, because sales does have its ups and downs, right?
Mhm.
So, where's the modern sales leader? What are they doing today? What do they do?
So yeah, I mean, like for us in our culture, and every company is different, right? So we're a small company, and it's different like running a sales organization of like 8 people
Sure.
versus 100 people. When it's small, like it's easy to have collaboration because like you're there, and you're there, and you're there, and like we all know each other. When it's bigger, it's like all disparate, and that's where it gets a little more challenging. But for us, like it's we just celebrate all these things. Like we do a lot of things we've talked about, right? We have a common set of operating metrics, and everyone knows where they are. You talk about it in the weekly sales meeting. You talk about it in the one-on-one. You celebrate people who are doing it well. You tell them why. You kind of socialize all that stuff. We do all kinds of things. Like we have like real-time bursts when someone does like closes a deal or has a great meeting. It flashes off on the TVs, and people know, and they collaborate, and they pat each other on the back. Every time a deal's won, like burst goes out, everybody gets a message via Slack, and then everyone kudos each other. They send these gift messages to each other. Like you just kind of everybody's winning together and learning from each other. But also, it's not just all fun. Like there's like a really clear set of expectations, and everybody knows how they're doing against them. So for us, like we have these cultural values we've defined, which are green thumbs is the first we call it go to 11. So green thumbs, like get in the weeds, like we want you in the middle of things, kind of figure things out. Obvious, meaning like what's expected of you, and there will never be a surprise. So it should be really obvious, like how you communicate. It should be really obvious what's expected of you. It should be really obvious if you're not performing, and be really obvious if you are performing. The T is 2 ears and 1 mouth, so use them in proportion. Like in being in sales or anybody, be humble. Like you gotta listen. You gotta kind of listen. Then one life. So one life means like there isn't like work and then home. Like you have one life, and it's all got to come together. And so I like every week. One of the things that I do, which kind of comes back to leadership stuff. Like I write an email, so it's like my Friday notes. And just like my personal thoughts on the week, like here's some things that I observed, as I saw. But every week it always starts out with personal. Like the first thing I address is like personal. Like here's what happened in my life. Here's what's going on with my kids. Here's a picture of my daughter. Like whatever it might be. And it's like it's setting the tone that like it's it's one life that we're all trying to live here together. And like it doesn't mean you have to be at 8 and you can't leave before 5. Like you got to kind of make it all work together. And last is 11. Like always push for a little bit more. Always push a little more. So like that's more the cultural side of it, but then the other part is a lot of the stuff I talked about, just managing the sales organization.
Okay. Maybe talk to us specifically about coaching. What have you seen kind of work just from a coaching perspective? I mean, how are you running maybe one-on-ones and just on a regular basis get that regular feedback and at the same time give reps the type of coaching they need?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've done a lot of one-on-ones and seen other people do one-on-ones effectively and not effectively. I think that there's a few, like doing it the right way. I mean, I'll give you some just tactical things, which I think is kind of the key is like one is it should be consistent. Like they should happen either once a week or every other week. And you should hold to it. Like no question, like it'll move around. Things get rescheduled or whatever, but it's always got to happen. Like if it gets canceled, it's missed, reschedule it. Like it's got to happen because that communicates like I care. This time's important. We're going to commit to it, and like we're going to stick to it. Secondly, is that it should be the salesperson's meeting, not the manager's meeting. And I think that's a mistake that often happens. Is the manager comes in and is just like, what's closing? Like, what's happening? Okay, what do you need help with? Nothing? Okay, good. I don't think we really need this time. Like, okay, we'll talk later. Or they'll think, like, we talk all the time. Like, I don't need to have a one-on-one. So you can't do that. Like, you have to kind of come to the meeting and say, hey, here's a couple things that are on my mind. There are topics we need to cover. But, like, I expect you to come with an agenda. I expect you to come with some report on what's happening. And, like, the salesperson should know it's their meeting. And all it takes is a couple, like, awkward meetings for it to not be awkward anymore, and they'll come with an agenda, they'll come with their topics, they'll always come with something to talk about. We'll also always attend if there's something that you want to bring up to them, And like every time there's something, because there'll always be like intrigue, like what's the topic? So, that needs to happen. And the third thing is, this is the time to go through those kind of operating metrics. It's the time to say, let's zoom out for a second and just say, hey, are we really executing on the fundamentals? Because like just talking about what's closing like is crucial, but also like let's kind of separate, hey, are we really firing all cylinders?
Sure. Any questions there in the back? Kurt, you have some questions.
So what's the most unexpected thing that you ever thought, what was the thing that you thought you knew about sales leadership, and then you got into it and you realized, wow, that's not at all what I wanted.
And so the question is, what was the most unexpected thing that you came to maybe realize that you're wrong about in terms of sales leadership, and then realize, okay, well, maybe I should do something different?
I think that more when I was in sales than what I thought it was. Like I thought it was. I mean, like I said, I had this good leader that I had before me, but like I kind of thought. I think a lot of people when they move into management are surprised that like all salespeople aren't as good as you think they are. Like. So, and it's always like a shock. Like any person that first becomes a manager is like, whoa, like they're not all that good. And like what I actually did and was like really natural to me is not natural to other people. And so, very top performing salespeople, they just intuitively do what's needed. They figure out a way to win. And everyone's like, well, that's who I got to hire. Like that's the person. I got to go find more of her, like that operates like that, and it just is not realistic. So one of the things they get in there, they realize like, well, what I did day to day, like you ask the top performing salesperson, what are you doing that helps you win more? I don't know. Like I'm just doing what I do. I just close deals, and I got to make it happen. And it's not helpful. So you dig in, and you find out like what actually is happening. What are they doing intuitively that other people don't know that they're doing? And then you kind of now how do I replicate and copy that amongst other people? So like I remember, for me, I had the realization when I was selling that this is back in my e-price days, that what made me successful again was not some like magic closing technique. It was I'm consistently getting certain types of information out to my prospects. Like I'm sending ideas to them all the time. I'm always in town. I'm always there, available to meet with them in person. And like that, I don't realize that's what's working, but over time I realized like, wow, those things that I did, those behaviors that I controlled, that I didn't realize were that powerful at the moment, they really added up over time. And so those are some things that I did, and then when I started managing salespeople, I realized I got to operationalize that. So now, those people that are these middle performers that don't know what they need to do to get better, or the people that are new or at the bottom don't know what they need to do to be successful, like now I can set, like here's the things that the best people are doing, which when I was first as a manager, I just copied what I was doing. But then as you move up, you got to kind of figure that out across other people in the organization. So that's always the shock. That like if you have a big sales team, any organism is not going to be full of top performers. It'll always be top, middle, bottom. And you got to figure that out, and everyone's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, question there in the back.
I just have a couple quick ones and then like a...
Sure, and share your name as well.
I'm Matt Strauss. I'm vetting a couple startup companies right now. In terms of just the longest sales process, Bob, do you know, based on like the data of the companies that you might work with, which industry might have the longest sales process? Is it healthcare? Is it insurance, advertising? Do you have any of that data based on the companies that you work with and maybe the churn or whatever it might be?
Yeah, sales metrics based on like industries, what are longer sales cycles versus not?
So so certainly have the data on the by industry for certain things. Not really the sales cycle. I don't know if I can really honestly answer that question. I think, not from our business, but oftentimes like the manufacturing segment tends to be really long, but that's going to be, large purchases, et cetera. So I can't really give you a good answer on that one.
And then maybe, I guess, what, in terms of this highest success rate for companies, is there a number of touch points that you see in terms of the sales process? Just say you start at the VP, like where do you want to start getting in contact with the right decision makers? Because I've seen a lot of companies that just start at the associate level, and the associates are scared to bring it up to their boss.
Yep.
So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about number of touch points in terms of your outreach or engagement with prospects. So what have you seen? Maybe that's
Yes, there's
good
some
practice.
interesting data out there around this. So the one that always jumped out to me is that it takes an average of 7 attempts to get a prospect on the phone, but the average salesperson only tries twice.
Yep.
So that's like you think it's a futile effort, but it's not. It's a collection of things over time. So that's one thing on the touch points. You have to keep at it. And just because they're not calling you back or emailing you back doesn't mean they're not listening. It's just like you haven't convinced them to want to talk to you yet. That's one part of it. In terms of call high, call low, like what's the approach? There's no real clear answer, like because it depends on the business. Everybody would the classic kind of approach would be like always go high, understand like what their goals are, and then you move yourself down. But I think that's changing. I mean, like a lot of times the reality is that yes, of course I want to talk to the VP of engineering or whatever, but there's people whose jobs are to look into something that your product does. And like that, if you try to just go around that, like you're gonna fail. So, however, you still need to figure out, how do I use this person as my champion? How do I help? And how do I look at the sales process, not about convincing them, is how do I help them create a business case that they want to take to their VP? That's how I get in front of the VP. And maybe I won't be part of that meeting or not, but like, how do I help them, take that up internally? So you got to map the organization. Some things work that way, but generally, it is always best if you can start high and then move your kind of way down. But there's certain scenarios where it's better to start low, build up your business case, and then touch into the VP. Hey, here's all the things that I've learned. I want to connect with you. Here's why I think this really works. Your team is amazing. I'm not going around them, but this is what I've learned. This is a perfect fit. I want you to be aware. And by the way, John, who I'm working with, is awesome. So like, if that message ever got forwarded around, stop calling me, you got to work with John. That message is at least, John is great.
Yeah, that's a really good point, particularly because what's the average that they say is the number of people involved in the buying process? Like
Yeah, it's going up. I mean,
or-
it's 5 to 7. I mean, it's going.
So you really got to think about building consensus as opposed to just reaching a decision maker. We had a question up here. Your name?
My name is Pete O'Connell. I'm with Brightpoint. I have a question about like the level of humility that you actually like allow into like leadership. How important is it to be like a decisive leader versus like really looking to like younger people coming into the organization to see that they have something to really add that you really have no idea about? I mean, is that important? Is that something that you see as growing? Is it something that's always there?
I mean, the idea of a humble leader.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that you have to be decisive. Like being humble doesn't mean that you're not decisive. So you call it humility, you just call it like that you're interested in learning from people, you're open-minded, like whatever it might be. But I think it's important that you have to listen to people just in case there's something you're missing. Like sometimes when you're in leadership, you're far away from the front line of the reality that's happening. And so you got to maintain a pulse, and so that's where you want to talk, even if they're young and less experienced, like what is happening on the front line. So you need to understand that. The other part is that, to your point, they're not like a salesperson or a junior person isn't that experienced. So they wouldn't know, like they might say, this is the way we should run the company. Like they don't really know, but you want to kind of hear that insight. What a good leader will do is really listen to that insight. They'll listen to other people, and everyone will know, like, oh, you're talking to all these different people, and you're getting insight from everybody, and then the leader's like, here's what we're doing. But everybody knows that's not just, I'm stuck in my office and defining what we're doing. I know that leader talks to people, they talk to our customers, they understand what's going on. I don't agree with him, but I understand that, like, that's where the experience comes in, is like, I don't have the experience, that's not what I thought, but that person's more experienced. I know that they kind of thought through this, they talked to a lot of people, and so then that decisiveness is like easily accepted and bought into because they know that there's some thought put into it. The problem is when someone's decisive and they're making decisions after they're stuck in their office.
Hey Bob, I'm Michael from Greenhouse Software. At the beginning you were talking about managers versus leaders. And I'm wondering, how does a good manager lead by example when they aren't held to the same activity metrics or quota as their teams?
Yeah, so So first of all, so do you mean like if a sales manager is not held to the same things as their team because the sales manager's not selling themselves?
Correct.
Is that what you mean? Okay, yeah. So first of all, so a sales manager cannot be selling or doing those activities.
That's a good point.
It's an often kind of question, they're like, well, they should, if they're really good, they should carry a quota themselves and manage people. You can't effectively manage and help your people if you're also trying to close deals on your own. What ends up happening is you take the good stuff, you say, I got it, and then you try to run with it and other people aren't really learning anything. So what needs to happen is you need to kind of, the organization needs to run where you have like, usually that is a sign that the company isn't really ready to hire salespeople. So that really a couple people should be doing it just on their own. And then once they kind of figure out a process, then you bring in a leader to hire more and then manage them. So, however, the manager should be held to the same metrics as the salespeople. So for example, if you say every salesperson is expected to sell $50,000 a month, and I say I have 5 salespeople, and I expect them to make 50 calls a day or 50 meetings a week and 50, whatever the numbers are, the manager should be accountable to making sure those things happen. So there's complete alignment between the seller and the manager on those operating metrics. They have to be kind of in sync, but it's very dangerous to have the sales manager doing selling on their own because it just gets really kind of messy.
Yeah, I mean, it speaks to the whole notion of having like team leads. I see in a lot of companies, and to me, it's hugely disruptive.
Team leads can kind of work, but like they're not a manager. Like,
Exactly.
and that's kind of what's got to be clear. Is like the team lead is like, hey, this is the most experienced person. Like they're the voice, a little bit. They're the point person when we say, hey, what's going on in the small business sales team? They're the team lead that we're going to talk to. But like they're all sellers. That's different. That's different than management versus sellers. Did you have a follow up?
I was gonna just speak to team lead versus the manager.
Yeah.
Okay, hi, I'm Lisa with Startup Institute, and many, many years in entrepreneurial sales before that. But speak a little bit about what you see happening with the sales leader working with marketing and how that relationship has changed.
Sales and marketing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is, so if you go, it still exists, but I think if you go back 5, 10 plus years, you see like massive clash. And I think a lot of times because like the old way of marketing wasn't like today. Like the old way of marketing was more like branding and materials and pens and like conferences, where now it's much more about like it's demand generation, and so like it feeds directly into sales. So the kind of progressive organization, like the sales and marketing folks, they're joined at the hip because marketing is about lead gen, and there's like SLAs or service level agreements between what is a lead versus what an opportunity, and you kind of tie that stuff together. So I think a lot of that conflict is kind of eroding in kind of the right kind of setup of an organization. And more, like I'll see organizations where marketing will roll up to a CRO, or parts of, like say, a common setup now is a organization will have sales development reps who do like a qualification appointment setting, and then the sales team will take it from it's a qualified opportunity through to a close. And many times the sales development team will report up into marketing, because marketing's job is to find good qualified opportunities for the sales team. But that's like the point at which you find like there's got to be a real tie-in and agreement on what is a lead. Because suddenly what happens is now marketing is going to start to generate sales opportunities, not just generate leads and downloads and email addresses. So that's changing, and technology is kind of motivating that to happen.
There's a question back here.
So it goes back to the first question that this gentleman asked. And by the way, my name's Aaron with a subscription commerce platform called CleverBridge. So I've been in technology sales for about 13 years, and if you really think about the last 13 years and the evolution of the touch point, it's gone from pure smile and dialing, cold calling, to emailing, obviously kind of jointed with the call, but then social selling. And joining this firm, it's not the most sophisticated selling organization, but it's interesting to see that there is absolutely no one using the phone anymore. So in terms of your experience and kind of growing LevelEleven, you know, how effective are the touch points from emailing to calling to social selling? Like, what are you asking your managers to lead by? Like, what did you see and what's most effective?
Yeah, so the effectiveness of these different channels, particularly with social taking such a prevalent role now.
So I think really all of it needs to happen. I think it's really dangerous to, there's some folks that particularly when you're in an inside sales organization, particularly in sales development, where they're like, email, I just do email. Like everyone's on email, I can just do email, like I think that's wrong. Like you have to be on the phone with somebody. Not all day long, like the phone and an email, they complement each other, social selling kind of complements, it all has to work together. I just don't, I mean, it's still about making a human connection with somebody.
Right.
And like there has to be a conversation. Like for us, like we hold our team accountable to a certain number of calls. Like you have to be working the phone. Like it doesn't mean it's like all day long you're on the phone, boiler room, you got to make 500 calls a day. You just like make a little bit. Just expect to have a few conversations. And we actually say it can't be a sales opportunity. It's not a qualified sales opportunity. Even if the person's like, I like what you've got, I want to learn more, I'm the VP, here's what I accomplished. Like if you haven't talked to them on the phone, like that is not a qualified opportunity. Like you got to have some connection. Like talk for 5 minutes. Like it doesn't matter. You got to kind of talk to somebody.
And I understand the effective of getting the result of the conversation. And if your target profile is a C-level, VP level, you know, most high growth technology companies, they don't even have their phone numbers listed, right? So
Yeah.
getting someone on the phone but traditionally, like, I'm all for it, I'm a hustler, like, that's what I'll do. But walking into this and like not hearing people pick up the phone and result, like, I'm solely focusing on using emails, like, that's crazy to me.
Yeah, it's harder. I mean, it's gotten harder. I don't think it doesn't. I don't think it changes the fact that you need to have a conversation somehow. And maybe it's on the phone, it's a different format, but like it does make it harder. There's no question. But you got to talk. I think you still need to talk to people.
Right. Now, in the interest of time, we're getting past 8 now. I do want to leave with one last question. You'll stick around for a little bit, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So if anyone has questions after, we'll be here for a little bit. But I always ask the same question of everyone that comes to speak, and it's: has there been like a book or movie or something that you've seen recently that's been particularly inspiring?
Mm-hmm. There's a book I read recently. This is a little bit more of kind of an entrepreneurial book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. So it's written by Ben Horowitz, who was a multi-time CEO and a venture capitalist.
That was Opsware, right? That was the company.
Yeah. And I just thought it was a great book because it wasn't like a lot of management theory. It was like real kind of reality stuff. So that was like, for me, like that was very inspiring to me and helped me realize like, wow, like even like a prolific, highly successful person went through a lot of crap. And like, and the stuff that they had to deal with, it's very, that was great. There's another one, like, I'm just starting to read it, but like is actually gaining a lot of popularity in our company. I just haven't picked it up yet. Called Cracking the Sales Management Code. Yeah, and so I keep hearing about it. I've started, our team has been raving about it, but that's another one I can't say that I've read it and can tell you, but I've heard really good things about it.
Yeah. It's really helpful, and thank you so much for coming here tonight and speaking
Thanks
and
for
sharing your thoughts.
Thanks
Can we
for
just
the
get a round of applause?